Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. So I'm going to talk to you about, I guess, a typical day at work for me, which I'm going to kind of cover an entire year, really, because I can't really sum it up all into one day. But let me get my mouse in the right place here. So I'm a wildlife biologist. I'm currently officed out at Quabbin. I work at the Quabbin and the Ware River Watershed, and also sometimes out at the Wachusett Reservoir. And as a little background, I am originally from Massachusetts. I was a tomboy growing up and loved going outside. My parents were pretty awesome and took us on camping trips every year. We paddled the Saco. We explored Moosehead Lake by boat. We were always up in the White Mountains, and also spent a lot of time in the Sebago Lake region. And I actually never knew that wildlife biology was an option for a career until I moved out west, and I spent some time living in Wyoming and Montana. And I got my associate's degree from Northwest Community College in Powell, Wyoming. And I got my bachelor's degree from the University of Montana in Missoula, Montana. And I've been working with the DCR since 2005. I started off as a seasonal and eventually got hired as a full-time wildlife technician, and I'm now a full-time wildlife biologist. And once this spring season kicks off, I will be in my 19th year with the DCR, and it has been an awesome journey. So I'll just start off with a little bit of background about the Division of Water Supply Protection. We manage and protect the drinking water supply for the greater Boston area and some other areas out this way. I work at the Quabbin River, Wachusett, and then we also cover the Sudbury Reservoir Watershed, which is an emergency drinking water supply for the DCR. So the mission of the DWSP is to utilize and conserve water and other natural resources, to protect, preserve, and enhance the environment of the Commonwealth, and to assure the availability of pure water for future generations. So here is a map of the watershed system. As you can see, it goes from Quabbin through the Ware River watershed to Wachusett, and from here it makes its way to Marlborough and then to the Boston area. So we are happy to say we are one of the cleanest water supplies in the country. We supply water to approximately 3 million people. That's about 890,000 households and 5,500 businesses. An average of 200 million gallons of water per day is supplied. I did look it up today, and according to the Water Defense website, Massachusetts is second on the list for the best tap water in the United States. Our properties are 87% forested, 3% non-forested, 2% open water, 4% wetlands, and 4% administrative areas. So a watershed is a geographic area of land in which all surface and groundwater flows downhill to a common point, such as a river, stream, pond, lake, wetland, or estuary. And the watershed includes both the streams and rivers that convey the water, as well as the land surfaces from which the water drains into those channels. So I work for the natural resource section under the Division of Water Supply Protection. And our mission is to provide effective natural resource management for protecting the water supply and meet management plan objectives for forest, wildlife, and biological diversity. Ken McKenzie is the Director of Natural Resources, and he is officed at Wachusett. And additional wildlife staff is Hillary Seiner, who is officed at Wachusett, myself, Elise Stanmeyer, who is out here at Quabbin with me, and we have a seasonal wildlife technician that works with Hillary at Wachusett. But really, we all work on projects across all watersheds and work together quite often. So additional natural resources staff includes habitat management specialists, a land protection coordinator, a watershed protection coordinator, and we have a regional planner. So as I said, it's hard for me to sum it all up into one day as everything changes throughout the season. So I'm going to go through each season as a biologist here. And my job duties change day by day as well. So I'm going to discuss most of the projects we do, but we do have many other projects that sometimes we get pulled into on a daily basis or once a year. So let's start off with spring, which, looking out my window right now, there's still several inches of snow on the ground. So hopefully that changes soon and we can kickstart the field season. And spring, really, once the snow melts, we're outside, and it's nonstop, mostly through the fall. So some of the stuff we do starting in the spring are beaver and muskrat surveys and dealing with complaints and issues with them. Also just surveying in general for activity. We survey vernal pools. We do deer, moose pellet surveys. Our loon monitoring season begins. We coordinate with MassWildlife as they come out on our property and do bear dens and bald eagle banding. So beaver, I can tell you, as long as there's water open, we are dealing with beaver every day every day through every season. So spring is when beaver emerge from their lodges. And I'll talk a little bit about the cycle of a beaver, if some of you don't know. So they have on average two to four kits a year. And what happens is the 1-year-olds from the previous season will stick around, and they basically help mom and dad with the kits from the present year. And the following year, when the 1-year-olds are now 2-year-olds, they are basically kicked out and told to go take care of themselves, and they move out on their own, and the new 1-year-olds are there to take care of the new kits. So those 2-year-olds that are kicked out, those are often the ones, unfortunately, you'll see hit on the roads, but because they're tend to be the most on the movement this time of year. They'll start to dam streams, brooks, and rivers. And beaver in general prefer slow moving waters, a more flat area versus steep inclines. It makes it easier for them to build a dam and actually hold back the water. So for us at the DCR, some of the things we deal with are blocked culverts and flooded roads. And sometimes the beaver also cause property for homeowners on lands adjacent to us. So we will often work with landowners to come up with a solution. So some beaver damage. This is part of a rail trail that was washed out years ago. The beaver were damming upstream here and eventually got bad enough that during a storm, it caused the rail trail to wash out. We try to stay ahead of that, but sometimes, unfortunately, these things happen. And here is a flooded road at the Ware River Watershed, where beaver have flooded. And we did go in and we were able to come up with a solution and get the road working again. And one of the ways we do this are using water flow control devices. So they're used to allow water to flow through the dam or culvert, but it still maintains a level of water at a constant volume so that both the landowners and the beaver are happy. So as you can see here, this is a cage, which essentially gets submerged in the water. And from there, it has a pipe that comes out of it. And the pipe dumps water through the dam, like you can see here, or through the culvert. And that way the water continues to flow. It will annoy the beaver because they are triggered by any sound of flowing water, but it allows the water to flow, but the beaver can also stay. So it's an alternative to lethal control. And as I said, we work with town and landowners to alleviate problems. Another more simple form we've used before is right here, where we just place fencing around a culvert, and there's also fencing on the bottom here so the beaver can't get into the culvert. And you usually do odd shapes so that it makes it harder for beaver to actually dam around it. And this has worked pretty successfully. Every site is different, so we've had to modify these flow devices depending on the site, depending on if it's an issue with the dam or if they're plugging a culvert. Every site's different. We're always modifying our designs. So this is another fun project we get to work on in the spring, and that is surveying vernal pools. So what is a vernal pool? Well, vernal means spring, and vernal pools are scattered throughout New England. and they're actually very common. They occur in almost every town in the state of Massachusetts. They are fed by snowmelt and spring rains. And most pools dry up through the summer. Some can remain with water for a period of time. And the biggest thing with vernal pools is they have no fish. If it has fish, it is not a vernal pool. So over here, you can see we have a fairy shrimp and a predaceous diving beetle that we pulled from a vernal pool. So in Massachusetts, the obligate species in vernal pools are spotted salamander, blue spotted salamander, Jefferson salamander, marbled salamander, wood frog, and fairy shrimp. And breeding activity by any of these amphibians or the presence of fairy shrimp indicates a vernal pool. So the predaceous diving beetle over here, this is considered a facultative species, which is a species that will utilize a vernal pool, but can also be found in other bodies of water. So some other facultative species include American toads, spring peepers, great tree frogs. And oftentimes we are doing the surveys during our forestry lot review season. So we will go out into potential forest management areas and survey the vernal pools. The reason we do this is to mark off the vernal pool and map it, and to make sure it is kept free of debris from the forestry operations. We keep a shaded area within 100 feet buffer around the vernal pool, and we make sure there is low intensity harvest activity near the pool, preferably the activities when the ground is dry or frozen. And we also try to retain a canopy shaded condition within 100 feet of the vernal pool. So another thing I mentioned are deer and moose pellet surveys. And these are really fun because after being stuck inside all winter, this is something that gets us outside and gets our legs moving through the woods, and get to see what else is going on in our forests. But basically, it's a way of coming up with deer and moose densities. So counting deer and moose droppings has an advantage. So first, droppings are easy to see. They don't move, and they can be counted over a longer period of time. In addition, counting these droppings is relatively straightforward and can be done with a minimal amount of equipment and personnel. So the surveys are done when the snow is melted, but prior to leaf out, and the droppings are most visible during this period. So what happens is if you were to try to do them after leaf out, the shading from the leaves make it really hard to actually see these piles. So what we do is, this is a map of some of the transects that we walk at the Wachusett Reservoir. And we head out and we walk these transect lines, and every 100 feet we stop and we see if there are any deer or moose droppings within a 4-foot radius. So at each of those, we record the number of pellet groupings. So pellet groupings have to have 10 or more individual pellets, and they are not counted if there's less than 10 pellets in a group within that 4-foot radius. And we only count pellets that are largely on top of the leaf litter. We can't move leaf litter around and count it. So this data is collected and is put into a formula that will then give deer per square mileage within that area. And we do this at the Sudbury Reservoir, the Wachusett, the Ware River, and the Quabbin. So here's one of my favorite projects, is working with common loon. So common loon are a species of special concern in Massachusetts. So in the springtime, what we start doing is making repairs and deploying loon nesting rafts. And we usually do this at the beginning of May, preferably into mid-May. Sometimes weather or wind delays us. As long as we get them out by the end of May, ideally, is what we like to try and do, because loons usually start nesting around Memorial Day is an average. Some pairs use them, some don't. We have pairs that we have tried to get on the rafts for years because they're in spots where their nests get flooded, and they will swim right past the raft and hop right back on land where they've been nesting before. And unfortunately, they end up getting flooded again. So hoping eventually some of those pairs will start using rafts. So what we do is, as you can see, we have, this is a typical nesting raft with cedar logs, and we put a canopy on it. and that is used for shade as well as a predator guard, because eagles are a big predator of loons, chicks, and their eggs. Before we deploy the raft, we put a bunch of vegetation on it, and this one actually grew up really awesome. Sometimes we luck out and we get wildflowers on them, and they're really pretty looking, but it gives them a little bit of protection as well. And most of these rafts are placed within quiet coves. Some of them are out in a little more open area, which is why cedar rafts are ideal, because they can take a beating from the water. So this is another fun project we've been able to go out with MassWildlife to do, and that is collaring and checking on black bears. And usually we go in on black bears that are collared, and these collars give a location and often provide like a home range of that black bear. It locates the bear in the den. So it gives an idea of the habitat that they use, and bears usually have 2 to 3 cubs a year. And it also gives cause-specific mortality, so you know what, maybe how they died, or also condition. Like we did just this bear right here, this little cub. She was the only cub from her mom here this year, and Wildlife Biologist thinks that it was because last year they didn't have the best food available because of the drought, so she only had 1 cub. And if there's a year where they get a lot of food, they may have 3 cubs. And I'm putting a little black bear in my jacket to keep it warm. And right here, she's getting weighed. And then this is her mom getting weighed. And they check general condition of the black bears and take obviously biological data like weight and their hair. They take hair samples, skin samples. So bear dens. There's all sorts of types of bear dens that they choose. I've seen some that are just a simple pile of leaves and sticks next to a log, to something as intense as this one, or in this one here, the cub in the sow that I just showed you in the previous slide, she was actually under a big old dead tree at the bottom of the tree. Another thing we get to do with MassWildlife is bald eagle banding. So last year we had 1 pair of eagles that nested at Wachusett, and Quabbin generally has 5 to 8 pairs. And last year we counted 5 nesting pairs. The chicks are banded at about 4 weeks of age, because they can fly by 8 weeks, which makes it more difficult. And usually they have 1 to 2 chicks. And what happens is a tree climber from MassWildlife, as you can see here, makes his way up the tree, carefully puts the eagle chicks into these sacks and lowers them down. And this is us banding them. They each get a leg band. So the left leg here is their colored band, and that indicates that they're from Massachusetts. Over here is their federal band, a silver band. That's sort of like their social security number, is the way I like to say it. They're actually, if you look at the size of their talons, the chicks are actually really, really calm, at least when I've been out to do it. But the one thing you have to worry about are their talons, because they can hurt themselves. So here, what I'm doing is I'm holding its talons down while the MassWildlife biologist does the leg bands and takes biological information. So now we're into summer. Summer, we'll say June to August, and this is when we do our breeding bird surveys. It's when our loon surveys really get kickstarted. We do small mammal live trapping, and we have a small mammal camera trap project. I'm hoping to have time and the ability to show you a couple of the videos from those. Unfortunately, I couldn't embed them in PowerPoint, so we'll see if we can get them to work at the end. We do bat surveys, and always beaver, and also pollinator gardens. So breeding bird surveys are usually done within the first couple weeks of June, and they're excellent indicators of habitat. And we usually do them driving and stopping at different points along a road, or in the woods, stopping at specific points. So you need to know birds by song, and we have a couple biologists on staff that are excellent with doing this, also by sight as well. And depending on changes in habitat and other factors, the bird suite can change over the years. So as I mentioned, this time of year, we get busy with our loon surveys. And so loons are visual predators. They eat fish, crayfish, snails. And so what we do is once we've got the loon rafts out and we know that they've started nesting, we get out on a weekly basis, sometimes more than that if we can. And as I said, they usually start nesting around Memorial Day. We have some pairs that'll nest a little bit earlier than that. And our latest pair that we've ever had has nested, was right around 4th of July, which is actually pretty late. But usually takes about 28 days of incubation. And then we monitor the chicks to fledging. So fledging we count as about 6 weeks of age. And we actually do go out into the fall and check on the loons as well. One of the things we do to help us identify the loons is a banding program. And we coordinate with Biodiversity Research Institute out of Maine. And they come down and we go out at night and we band adults and sometimes the chicks. Another program that we have going on is lead tackle and monofilament line recycling. Lead contamination is the #1 cause of death in common loon, and it only takes a piece of lead the size of a piece of rice to kill a loon, an eagle, and other wildlife. We've also had over the years loons and other wildlife that have been tied up in monofilament line. So we have a program that we have canisters throughout the watersheds that we place out where folks can place their fishing line and their lead tackle to get recycled instead of leaving it out in the environment. This here is actually an x-ray from Tufts Veterinary Clinic of a loon that was brought in, and you can see the pieces of lead tackle, and that was its cause of death. So nighttime loon banding is super fun. So basically we go out at night, you have a person driving the boat, you have a person with a spotlight, and then you have a netter. So the netter and the person with the spotlight are out on the front of the boat. And basically what we do is you're blinding the loon and you're mimicking an intruding loon. So using loon calls or chick calls or whatever. And the hopes is that the adult, the territorial adult that you want to band will come to the boat. They get scooped up in a net and we either bring them to shore or we'll work on a boat. And all biological data is collected. Feather samples, blood samples are collected, and the loons are given, probably should have put a better picture here, but if they don't already have them, they get colored leg bands. So on their left leg, they'll get a leg band combination, and on the right leg, they get a leg band combination. And usually on the left, they get 2 colored bands, and on the right, they get a colored band and a federal band, which again is sort of like their social security number. So last year at Quabbin, we had 18 territorial pairs. We had 12 pairs that nested. We had 5 nests that were successful, and 4 of them were on the rafts. 5 chicks hatched and 3 chicks fledged. Unfortunately, this is actually last year and the year before were actually really bad years for loons on the Quabbin Reservoir. And one reason I think this is going on is we have a lot of what we call rogue loons coming in. And based on all of our data and the chicks that have hatched in the past, they will usually return to their natal lakes in between the ages of 5 to 7 years. And some of our best years for chicks hatching were 5 to 7 years ago. So I think what's happening is a lot of these loons are coming back as adults and they're trying to find their own territory and find a mate. And loons will actually get really aggressive, and they do fight pretty aggressively, and they'll try to, a new loon may come in and try to take over a territory. And unfortunately, it disrupts any of the nesting pairs that were there. They will also come in and kill chicks that have already hatched. So we're hoping at some point that this sort of just calms down and the loons get settled in again, and the Quabbin chicks fledging numbers will start going up again. Wachusett had an excellent year last year. They had 7 territorial pairs. 6 of those pairs nested. 5 were successful nests, and 4 of them were on rafts. 8 chicks hatched and 8 chicks fledged, which is really awesome. So another couple of activities that we do, one in the summertime, one is small mammal trapping. And these are on plots at the Wachusett Reservoir. And this has been going on for many years. And it takes place before and after forest management to provide information on wildlife health and impacts. The traps are placed along a transect, and they're baited with peanut butter and oats. They are checked daily. Animals that are captured have a small bit of hair clipped from their hind end, so that if it's captured again, we know it's a recapture. The animals that are captured are sexed and noted if they have any parasites like ticks or botfly larvae. So some of the stuff we catch tons of mice, tons of redback voles, some shrews, moles, flying squirrels, chipmunks, red and gray squirrels, weasels, and yes, sometimes skunks, which can be a little tough to get out of the trap. And we do not clip their hair. We let them go. Another project that's going on out here at Quabbin is a camera trap project. This takes place at some of our special habitat, we call them focus areas, at the Quabbin and the Ware River. It's not as involved or as intensive as the small mammal trapping at Wachusett, but it will give a general absence and presence of species. And this again is the project I'm hoping to show you some videos from at the end, but we have video of mice, shrews, voles, flying squirrels, chipmunks, gray squirrels, red squirrels, weasels, birds, fox, bear, fisher, raccoon, and porcupine. Basically, we place these camera boxes out, and the wildlife camera is placed at the end here, and it is baited with bird seed, mealworms, and peanuts. And the cameras are triggered by motion. So when critters come in and are feeding on the seed and whatnot, it takes 10-second videos of them. And also this summer, we focus on bats. And I don't know if any of you were lucky enough to see Elise Stanmeyer's video. I think it was a couple weeks ago on bats. She just recently started with us, and she is our new bat expert. So I'm really happy to have her on board. And I do think her video is available on the Visitor Center website. But so what we do is in mid-June to mid-July, we do driving routes, as you can see here. So Wachusett, the Ware River, and Quabbin. We do these driving routes. We put a recorder on the top of our vehicles that record the echolocation as we're driving. And then we have a program that we put all this information in, and it will spit out and identify what types of species of bats were recorded. Another thing we do is at these long-term monitoring sites where we do the small mammal work, we will put out these, which are a bat recorder, and these get left out for a period of time. And same thing is they'll record echolocation data, and we put them into the same program, and we'll give species ID. Another project we've had going on at Wachusett and Quabbin are bat houses. Some of them are being used, some are not, and we may end up at some point modifying them or moving some around. And our pollinator gardens. So several years ago, the biologists at Wachusett worked with the engineers, and they were able to start pollinating some areas, seeding some areas on our dikes out at Wachusett instead of just keeping cut grass. And this has been an awesome project, and we're trying to expand on it. Right now at the Quabbin Visitor Center has a pollinator garden right outside that you can come and see this summer. And we've seeded other areas around the administration buildings and in fields throughout the watersheds. I don't know if any of you have heard, but the monarch is listed as endangered by the International Union for Conservation in Nature. It's not currently listed under the Endangered Species Act, but it is being reviewed for that. So we're hoping to convert as what we can to native forbs and grasses, and also we'll delay mowing in some of our fields that contain milkweed so that the full cycle of the plant can be carried out. And another program that we do is invasive species control, which will also help with this. In 2022, the Wachusett staff participated in the Monarch Blitz, which they surveyed a couple of the fields out that way for monarch, and this was looking for chrysalis and actual adult monarch butterflies. We're hoping to expand that further this year, hopefully out here at Quabbin as well. And September through November, our fall season. So this is when our gull surveys begin and monitoring. We have an annual Prescott Beaver survey, and our deer hunt preparation begins. So this project ended quite a while ago, but I thought it was kind of important to keep in here and talk about because gulls are a concern for water supply. Years ago, we had thousands of gulls that were roosting on Quabbin and Wachusett Reservoir. Wachusett at one point had an average of 7,000 gulls on the reservoirs at night. So this project was done to document their movement. In 2008, we started the study and targeted locations with large gull numbers, placed wing tags, leg bands, and some with GPS transmitters to track movement. 2017 was the last year that we tagged gulls, but it was, like I said, it was an important project to discuss, and we are still sort of continuing some aspects of it. The gull numbers on the reservoirs have reduced significantly. I think this year, the peak at Wachusett was around 1,500 and Quabbin was around 1,000. I know folks often call gulls the rats of the sky, but I have to say that after doing this project, I do have an appreciation and a love for gulls. They're pretty neat birds if they're left to do things naturally. Unfortunately, with humans around, they have a lot of food sources, unnatural food sources. The average or the oldest herring gull that was ever documented was 49 years old, which is pretty cool. So great blackback gulls, which is this gull over here. These are the largest gull in the world. They're about the size of a bald eagle. They will actually prey on smaller gull species and their eggs. So this is this shows one of our wing tagged gulls. Here are the leg bands, same as other, the loons and the eagles. They get a colored band on their left leg and their federal band on their right. And this is a map of a gull that moved from the north to the south, and you can see its movement pattern, which was much further than we had expected to see gulls move. And overall with the project, we publicized it. We did a lot of outreach, and we got over 3,000 sightings of our gulls, and we still get them, not as many as we used to, but we still get sightings of our gulls. So where are they finding food? And this is still an issue. And this is part of my talk where I can tell you my job is not always glamorous. So I've spent a lot of time at wastewater treatment plants with other wildlife staff. That's a place the gulls like to hang out. Landfills, that's me at a landfill with lots of gulls and trying to trap them. One of the issues is humans feeding gulls, as you can see from these. So what we did to try and help the situation is, like at the wastewater treatment plants where we were seeing a lot of gull numbers, we went out and wired the tanks and with a stainless steel wire, because what we found out is gulls they will not pass through things. So they don't want to go through wire or go through anything and have anything above them. So this prevented them from going into the open water tanks. I think there's only one active landfill in Massachusetts now, and that is actually monitored by the USDA. So they have an active harassment there now, so numbers have gone down there significantly. One of the other places or big issues that we found were people feeding gulls. And it was unbelievable to see the amount of people that will actually come to parking lots and big mall parking lots or grocery store parking lots and feed gulls. So we went out and we put up signs and we tried to do public outreach, because what we try to tell people is it's not good for the water quality, but it's also not good for the gull. So feeding gulls white bread is not good for their diet, and it actually shortens their lifespan because they're not getting the nutrients that they need. And if left alone, they will find food. So as I said, we do a little bit of continuation on it. This is one of our signs that we put up in the parking lots. We have EQ, our environmental quality section, has harassment programs at both Wachusett and at the Quabbin Reservoir. We do weekly roost surveys. Wachusett, we're able to do from shoreline. There's a great location to see gulls from. Quabbin, unfortunately, is a little bit more difficult. So a few years ago, we teamed up with the DOT Aeronautics Drone Pilot Program. And they fly drones from boat or from shore, depending on conditions, to get us photos of gulls on the water. So now we will go to our next one of our other projects that we do in the fall, and that is the annual Prescott Beaver Survey. And this is actually a really neat project. This has been going on since the 50s. And so I'm sure most of you might know that the Prescott Peninsula is off limits to the public. So beaver have had little interference. We get together in November, a shoreline survey is done of the area to look for, like right here is a shoreline lodge, an active shoreline lodge. And then these are all the internal routes that we walk. So groups of people go out and they walk these streams looking for beaver activity. And they're looking for fresh mud on the lodge, fresh scent mounds, fresh chew. And in November, beaver are usually trying to get ready for winter, so you'll find food caches. And then we have our deer hunts, which take place in the wintertime. And this also includes our moose hunter survey. And then we continue with our gull efforts, and then lots of office time in the winter, which can be nice because after spending so much time out in the field, we have to do something with everything that we've collected. So it's kind of our opportunity to get it all together and organize it. So we have our deer hunts at the Sudbury, Wachusett, Ware River, and Quabbin watersheds to maintain a healthy deer herd and also a healthy for healthy forest regeneration. And at our controlled deer hunts, we run check stations where we collect data about the population. So we collect the weight, the sex, and the age. And the age we use by looking at their teeth, and depending on the wear and the number of teeth they have, it can indicate what age they are. So during our controlled hunts, we also have a moose survey that we do every year. Hunters see a lot of stuff while they're out there in the woods, more than we actually get to see. So they've been incredible participating in this moose survey, which has been taking place since, I believe, 2006. And basically they're sent moose sighting cards, and they fill in any information when they see the time, the location, and what they saw: a bull, a cow, a calf, or an unknown, but they knew it was a moose. And they hand these in when they're leaving the hunt. And what we do is we take the data and we map it. So this was some information taken during one of the Prescott hunts, and we're able to figure out by the points and by the time and trying to track the movement to get a general idea of how many moose we have on our property. And it's usually, we figure it's around 100 moose on within the Quabbin. These are just some different types of preferred moose foods in Massachusetts. So same with the gulls, and really most wildlife is, we try to spread the word and ask people not to feed wildlife. Deer have a specialized digestive system, and it changes based on season and what their natural food availability is. So if you're actually putting out apples or corn for them in the winter, it can actually kill them because they're not set up at that time of the year to digest that type of food. And it also, feeding them congregates them, which can spread disease. So we do ask, if you see any types of feeding on our property, that you report it to our rangers. And this is not me, this is the previous Quabbin biologist, and just showing our office work time. And then, as I mentioned, we've been pulled into other projects randomly. So we've done stuff with snakes and turtles and dragonflies. So we're always getting pulled into other things. It's pretty neat. We get to work with all sorts of different critters. And this is just a little chart of, different types of wildlife and how long they live and how many young they have. And usually young is, with most wildlife, is based on health and food availability. So I don't know if anyone on here has any interest in ever becoming a wildlife biologist, but just some hard facts about it is lots of school. I lucked out. Like I said, I have my bachelor's degree, but it's so competitive now that I would definitely recommend going with a master's degree. It is hard to find a job right out of school, and most seasonal jobs do not pay very well. And if you don't like the outdoors, it's definitely not for you, because like I said, it's not always glamorous. You're working in locations that you might not want to be. There's ticks, there's mosquitoes, there's deer heads. So that's not always fun, but I do love my job. And you get to do what a lot of people do, on their vacation or after work some days, and things that people see on TV. We get to travel to different places. And yes, if I can wear what I want to work, I don't have to wear high heels. I'm not stuck at a desk all day, and I get to use cool equipment. And if you get a state or federal job, there are good benefits to that. It may require working seasonal jobs for a while before finding something that's permanent. And some of those seasonal jobs only pay for give you boarding and maybe a stipend. And I also recommend volunteering as much as you can, work seasonal positions, and some important tools. Our GIS tools are becoming more commonly used. We use ArcPro, AGOL, Survey 123, and Field Maps, which are all GIS-based programs. So I always encourage students that are interested in the wildlife, in going into the wildlife field or in it, learn into school for it, to take some of those skills up, because they're really important. And lastly, little gull humor and any questions.
Thanks, Jillian. That was fascinating. And I love hearing my colleagues do presentations about what they do. And because all of them love their jobs, I think.
Awesome.
So we did have a couple questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
One of them was, do you think having colored bands on these animals make them more visible or vulnerable to their predators?
I have, that question has come up quite a bit for, the different projects. There has been no evidence, at least with the loons and the gulls and the eagles, that it has caused any issues with them. There was some concern with the wing tags we were using on the gulls, that other gulls might, not want to be near them or hang out with them, but we got lots of observations where those tagged gulls were still doing the same things with all the other gulls. So I haven't heard of anything that's where it's caused an issue. And certainly our loons, we have tons of loons are banded all across the country, actually, and they've all been, in territorial pairs, nesting pairs, hatched and fledged chicks. So those don't seem to be an issue either.
So then we have a question. It's actually sort of a two-part question about the gulls, asking, why has the gull population been reduced? And did we reduce it, or was it natural?
I don't have the exact answer to that, but there are some thoughts. So for one, like I mentioned at this point, so years ago, there are a lot more open landfills in Massachusetts and surrounding states. Right now, Massachusetts, there's only one active landfill that I know. And as I mentioned, USDA actually has an active harassment program, which was not always in place. So that has helped bring those numbers down from 7,000 plus to I check in with them regularly, and the highest numbers this winter has been around 300 gulls. So that's a huge decrease just from them actively harassing the gulls. Also, I know the Hartford landfill, which was a huge landfill not far from the Quabbin, that closed in 2015. So I would imagine has helped also reduce the numbers. And we did put out signs and we try to educate people because I mentioned that I don't think any of us expected this when we were going out there tagging the gulls. I think a lot of us thought that, the occasional French fry was getting thrown out feeding these gulls, but what we actually found is there were groups of dedicated feeders. And I mean, we saw people show up with a car full of bread, and I am not exaggerating, full of bread, and they will come every day and feed these gulls. And I know, I mean, they were trying to do good and thinking they were trying to be helpful, but unfortunately, like I said, like the bread isn't good nutrition for gulls, so you're actually harming them more than doing good. So
and also Jillian, it's the overall population of gulls isn't reduced. It's just you're not seeing them at Quabbin and Wachusett.
Right. Yep.
So the overall population is not reduced, though.
Yep. Nothing. They have had some diseases over the years that have hit different populations, and I know this year avian influenza has been a concern, but this year, as far as like, I wasn't sure what was going to happen with avian influenza. We haven't seen a huge difference with our roost, so it's numbers are reduced, but that hasn't affected our gull population either. But so there's been different things over the years that do hit different gull populations.
So a couple questions about your choice of college, which is what made you choose University of Montana, and what other schools were on your list for this field?
I actually started off wanting to be a veterinarian. So, and I quickly decided that was not what I wanted to do. And I had a sister and an uncle living out west, and they both welcomed me to come out there and check out the area. So I actually spent a summer out there working at a resort, and I fell in love with it. And that was actually when I found out about, I mean, I knew about forestry. I didn't know about that wildlife biology was something that you could do. So that's what I found out about. I've always had a love of animals. So when I found out about that, it sounded awesome. And there's actually plenty of schools in New England that offer it. I just, like I said, I wasn't aware of it, and I had already was out west. So that's why I ended up going to school out there for that.
So this same person said, are there volunteer opportunities at Quabbin for high school students?
We do have
the wildlife biology area.
We do have a volunteer program. I'm not sure. I'd have to check in to see if we can do it on a high school level or not. Because I do know there's also an internship program that the DCR has, but generally that's college level students. But you have my name, and you can certainly reach out to me, and I can check into that for you.
So I'm just gonna type your email in the answer for this person.
Okay.
It's just her name, Jillian.Whitney@mass.gov. So the next question, actually, maybe I'll field this one. It says, considering the risk to wildlife, loons and others, and the risk of contamination, water quality, why is recreational fishing / boating allowed on Quabbin? So, Quabbin is primarily, it's a water supply. That's what it was created for. In the 50s, they did face pressure to create a fishing program to allow people to fish on the Quabbin. So they did create a very controlled fishing program. It's only 6 months of the year, April through October. The boating is limited not only by the size of the boat and the size of the motor, but at this point, private boats have to be decontaminated and actually wired to their trailer. So when they come to Quabbin, we know that they haven't been anywhere else, so they're not bringing invasive aquatic plants or insects or any kind of invasive aquatic life to Quabbin. And I would say, so the risk of contamination, water contamination from the boats is actually much less than I think people imagine. And then in terms of fishing and how its effect on wildlife, I think it's the issue with loons is it's not just at Quabbin, it's widespread using, or not just loons, but the filament and the lead. And lead is banned at Quabbin. And it's been going on for over 50 years. And a lot of the fishermen are actually very much advocates for the wildlife and do a great job protecting them and raising awareness of any issues. So
I actually get some awesome loon observations from some of the fishermen that are out there.
So, I mean, one of the things is, you know, that Quabbin that we do, you know, spend a lot of time working on is sort of trying to balance allowing a limited access for recreation for different things with protecting the water quality and then also, you know, providing a good habitat for wildlife. So, and then I think the last question we have is, well, actually, nope. Oh, just about your, a comment about your, alma mater, that the University of Montana has one of the best wildlife biology programs in the country.
Yes, they do.
And then this is actually a group of questions together. Is there any time you go out in the field independently or is it always in a group?
I'd say it's probably 50-50. I mean, there's certainly things that we do that, you know, you would be wise to do with someone, you know, as far definitely going out on boats and whatnot. There's always at least two of us. But then there's also a lot of things like some general surveying that we can do on our own.
Do you ever get overwhelmed at your job?
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes you have a day where you're like planning on doing one or two things and then you start getting lots of phone calls. Usually it's Beaver, and you know, you just have to shift and go in another direction really quick, and you know, you have deadlines, you're trying to get them done, but it's still really fun. So I'm not really, it doesn't bother me too much.
And the last question this person asked is, you know, does DCR hire someone with a bachelor's in environmental science? So all of our jobs are posted on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts job website, which is Mass Jobs. So you can actually put in a search and get all the different jobs that come up. So depending on what it is, what the job is, I mean, a lot of our colleagues do have bachelors in environmental science or, you know, engineering and hydrology and a lot of science-based stuff. I'm as a history major, I'm like kind of the outlier there, but it really depends on the job as to what people's backgrounds are. So are there any other questions? Doesn't look like it. So thanks again, Jillian. This was, as always, fascinating. Love your presentations. And thank you to everyone who joined us. And just our last remote program is next Sunday, and that's the one about fire ecology, forest fire ecology, which should be really interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.